Right. The problem we have at hand is working with Firebase Auth in Next13 App Directory. So in the Next13 App Directory, we have our components server by default. So as lead of said in the above comment, Firebase is primarily a client-side library. So their most APIs are client-side oriented. So in this project, I played with Firebase Auth and with Next13 in the app directory. So I have my auth.js file. Let's discuss the auth file. So this is the standard auth configurations for Firebase. I have inside this init.js file, I have my Firebase main configs where I am exporting the app object. So I'm using it to create an auth instance, which is our main auth instance we are using for everything, right? So from the Firebase auth, we have all the basic functions. Here I'm not using any providers. I'm using basic email password login. So there's the basic sign up. So create user with email and password, sign in with email and password, and sign out is there, right? So here I'm exporting all of these things to be used in my front end. So my front end um, is first of all there's the root layout, of course. Um, so after the root layout, I have this page JSX file. So it looks like this. So yeah, in the page file, this kind of a page file is a server component by default. So we can't put any client stuff here, of, for sure. Right. So what we do is usually when we have auth, this auth state showing up is usually bound to a navigation or something similar at first, right? So here I have this navigation bar at top, which I have put here, which is a client component. So I will show you why. So in this navigation component, you can see our favorite little line, use client. So this use client we have used here. So I'm importing all things. Look, we are importing all the client hooks. Right. So the primary thing we are going to do here is uh, we are setting up two links to two pages, which is a sign up page and a sign in page. So what I'm doing in the sign up page is, so if I go to sign up, um, it is going to be here. So there's going to be a sign up form component. So this component. So that would be the sign up page. So I have created this form as a control component. The main thing would be I am using this object called form data to store the email, password, and the confirm password. So when the user submits this form, so after entering this, what is going to happen is uh, we are going to call this Firebase function, sign up user with email and password. So this is coming from my Firebase Auth file. So which in turn calls uh, create user with email and password. So because this is a client component, this is going to call this is going to call this create user function just like it would call in a normal React application. All these things would be initialized and it will be called. So then I'm going to route a push the user. So after he signs up, he's going to send back to the home page, right? So when going back to the home page, these things are going to mount. Uh, so here, when the user comes to the home page after signing up, we need the person to be in a sign in stage, right? So we need to show his show that he is signed in, right? So here, um, so I'm going to quickly remove a basic user here that I have set up. So and I'm going to sign up to here. So I'm going to enter some very unsecure emails, a password. So here I press submit, right? And I am sent to the home page now. Right. Now you will be able to see two interesting things. Now there would be some string here. Let's forget about for a bit. You will be able to see this thing. Now no longer sign up and sign in is not shown, but only sign up. So why is that? That is because since navigation is a client component, I can persist the state there, right? So we can what we do is the moment when this component mounts, I use a use effect to check uh, whether the user is already there. So the first time the user comes in, there would be no user. After sign up, there would be a user. After sign in, there would be a user. After a person signs out, there would be no user. Signing out in here refers to calling this sign out function from Firebase. So here, something that we should know about Firebase is uh, like persistence is already built in. So I think it's there auth state persistence. So auth state persistence uh, from the Firebase SDK is already there. So it is going to be in this state where there is local persistence. So basically, when the first time user comes to the application, user is going to click sign up, enter his details, and we are going to call this create user with email and password. So after we call this create the user with email and password, uh, we are going we are going to get an auth object with this user, right? So I'm basically console logging it. Something interesting is when this auth object is coming, Firebase is going to handle storing this auth object and the current user securely in the local storage. So now now after we sign up, we need to we need to use this current user, right? So in order to use this current user, we need a source of truth. So now this source of truth is going to be this basically Firebase. So we are not going to manually store it locally. We are just going to use things given by tools given by Firebase to us to access the current user. So here, what I'm trying to do when navigation mounts every time is I'm going to call this get current user function. So what this get current user function does is, so there is the observer pattern, the auth observer given to us by Firebase, which is this on auth state change function. Here I have written a promisified version of it that gives me a user ID if a user is signed up or signed in. So basically, this get current user function, when I call it on this client component inside this use effect, would give me a user ID. So basically, the user ID is in Firebase or strings, right? So going to give me a user ID if a user is signed up or signed in. If those two are the case, basically I can get that user as a string. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that user the state of this navigation component every time it mounts for the first time, because it basically means renders for the first time. I'm going to set this user uh, to that UID, which is a string. So here initially it is set to null, right? That site initially shows up as sign up and sign in, but when the use effect runs after rendering, it is going to set itself to the user ID. So now if we check using here, yeah, so the state is now set to this value, which is the user ID, right? Now, uh, next thing. Now I think you are clear. Uh, we had this page. This page, the whole thing was a server component, but the parts where we need the context of the current user. So the parts that where we need the current user, we are going to make them a client component and use those client components to interface with Firebase. Since Firebase is a client first library, we are using the client components to access the uh, Firebase current user. So how we access the current user was by using this on auth state change function given to us by Firebase. Here it is just some promise magic that I didn't write on my own. I got some help from ChatGPT to write this. But anyway, what I basically get is when I call this function, if the user is signed up or signed in, that means either this function was called or either this function was called. I'm going to have a current user object stored in Firebase, which I'm going to call here. So basically, if I have a user, I am going to so if user is there, I'm going to show only the sign out button only. But if the user does not exist, that means the user is null. That means user have not signed up yet, or the user has signed out. We are going to have this state as null because uh, when I when I set the when the user click the sign out button, the sign out user function will call and Firebase will sign out the user. We will demonstrate it here by clicking on the sign out button. Uh, Something to notice though. Now I already have signed out. So something to notice though in the sign out button is this window.location.reload. So I will show you why I needed that. For now, let's just now we are a signed up user. So if I go to my Firebase console and check, I'll be able to see the user is there. Yeah. So now I'm going to sign in with my credentials, which I'm going to use here. So this is the so this route is the sign in route. I was not able to show this to you. In the sign in route, so this is the sign in route. So in the sign in route, I'm returning the sign in form. So this is very similar to the previous thing. What happens is basically if when I enter the email and the password and click the submit button, I'm going to call this function, which is going to await the function that calls Firebase to sign in the user with email and password. Then I'm going to send him to the home page. So notice that the moment I send him to the home page by using the router push, the navigation component is going to mount, which means it is going to render, right? So this effect is going to run after I sign in. The user, my current user would be there in the storage, and Firebase will give it to us with this function, which we can use to set the state and set the navigation bar as a user navigation bar of a signed in user. Right. But let's imagine a scenario where we need to access this current user not only on this particular navigation component but in another component of the same page. So here I have a component called cards, a component called cards in the uh, homepage. So this cards component, we will return some data, like they will use the user's ID. Let's assume this cards is going to use the user ID and use that ID to call an API and get some data and render here. But we are not going like to do that. We need the user ID, right? That means we need the current user. So inside this cards component, what I am doing is when it mounts, since we have the current user in our storage that is maintained by Firebase, we can basically on the use effect call the get current user and set the user as same as before. So I just added some loading states in order to show a loading state while the cards are loading, something like that, a very simple one. For now, it is only going to load the user. That's it. So if it is not loading, like basically if the loading is finished, that means this else block, and there is no user, I'm going to say please log in. But if it is not, if it is finished loading and there is a user here, that means this user is set to some string, some not is something not is that is not null. I'm just going to like put it over there, the user string, the ID over there as a some data. So right then, interesting thing is now inside these two particular client components. So this is our initial server component where we had the navigation and the cards. So these two, these cards and navigation are where we need the current logged in user. So since Firebase maintains the user's session inside our the device, which is the client. So we don't have access to this data on the server, but only on the client. We are going to access the auth user using the Firebase APIs inside client component. So now navigation is a client component, cards is a client. But let's assume we are going to sign out the person. So in this case, I sign out the user by calling this function. So only thing that is happening when the user signs out is the current user would be different. So that means different as in the current user will become null. So, but the thing is when I sign out the user, this after I click this button, the Firebase auth will call this function and will clear that storage of the user. And then what we are going to do is here it's a bit of a hack. I think there's a better way. The only reason I did this is because yeah, it is cool that I can set the user to null here, right? So when if I set the like after signing out the user, there is no user. We have to re-render the navigation component to say that the user is null, right? So because if we just like call this function, the navigation component state is not going to be updated. So we are going to update it by setting the user to null. But the issue is if I do that, uh, there's the this cards component, it is not going to be updated. So here we have this app directory. So navigation now knows the user is null, right? But cards does not know because it previously it accessed the storage and got the data to there. Now it is not going to see. Let's actually try this out. Uh, yeah. So now I'm going to do it, and now I'm going to sign out. Now I signed out, and like even if I, yeah, now I signed out. Now it's there. Uh, Let me try again. Right, right. This issue. suit at gmail.com. 24310. So I think this is right. Now, uh, if I click sign out, it is only going to update this navigation state. So now I need to bind the state of this navigation component to this cards component. So basically when we need to do kind of thing, we might have to lift the state of the user up to this place, and pass that state again to cards. Or we could set a context here, update that context, and let navigation and cards subscribe to that context. But we need our nice server rendering stuff in our page, right? We need server rendering for our whole page. So I want. So if you want server rendering on your page, but you need to do this authentication part as well. So what I have tried is, I don't know whether this is hacky. I invite you guys to try a better method. So what I do is basically a good old window dot location dot reload. So this would, uh, when the person clicks sign out, the whole page is going to re-render. So it is going to fetch everything, and the whole page is going to re-render, and basically the browser reloads right with this path. So now cards will unmount and mount again, where it will not have access to this get current user. So now when I click sign out, everything will be signed up. So this is the answer to the problem at hand. Hope you liked it. I will link the GitHub for this particular repo, and you can try this out actually in, I think, next or play. Yeah, next. Yeah, I will put the links as well. So, thank you.